Hey everyone, Rabbit here, and today I wanted to give you the build guide for the character that I've been working on, which I'm calling the Frostbite Acid Flask Falconer. This build has been a lot of fun, and it has good clear, it's tanky and monoliths, and it's got everything that I want in a character. And so I'm going to be going through the build and all the key notes with like the skills and the passives. Meanwhile, I'm going to have some gameplay going on in the background so you can look at how this build performs. I haven't pushed it super far. You can see here we're only level 91. We've only went to like 150 corruption, but we've killed tier 4 Jolro with it, and I believe you could push up to 300, 400 corruption plus easily with how this build is set up. So with that being said, let's get straight into it. So starting off with the pros of the build, it's got great clear speed, it has really fast movement with permanent haste, and it's very tanky in monoliths. The cons are that it is a damage over time build, so you have to ramp up your damage. It requires a lot of uniques, and it needs at least 2 tier 7 throwing mana cost reduction rings to really function, and it's not the best single target damage until it's min-maxed. This build uses Explosive Trap paired with the Acid Flask and Trap Sprinkler nodes to hurl a massive amount of Acid Flasks at your enemies, stacking really high Frostbite, as well as shredding enemy cold resistance and applying several other debuffs like Slow and Frailty. The build scales with Frostbite and Poison Chance, Frostbite Duration, Cold Damage, Damage over time and Elemental Damage over time, Freeze Rate Multiplier and Frost Penetration, and Throwing Attack Speed. For defenses, this is an extremely tanky build while running monoliths, and most of these defenses come from stacking up high ward from killing and freezing enemies, as well as stacking up really high Dust Shroud stacks through Explosive Trap, which gives us extremely high dodge and max glancing blows chance. We also generate Silver Shroud through our passives and Smoke Bomb, which gives us a guaranteed dodge on our next hit, as well as a burst of ward. The defenses include 60 to 85% dodge when properly stacked, 100% chance for glancing blows, which gives us a 35% damage reduction on hit, high ward on kill and ward regeneration each second, and a 100% dodge chance buff through Silver Shroud. When you pair all of these defenses together, you almost never get hit while mapping or bossing. When you do get hit, you get a massive amount of damage reduction from pairing your armor and glancing blows, while also stacking a high ward pool. I almost never die while playing this build, and it feels extremely comfortable to play. The main issue at high corruption in Last Epoch is that if you get hit, a lot of the times you'll just die, so my answer is to just never get hit. Going over the gear for the build, we use the Vial of Volatile Ice, which is required for the build to function. It converts our damage to cold and allows us to apply Frostbite with Acid Flask. You do not need a 4 LP version of this item, but if you do play on the Merchant's Guild, you can get one for under 100k on most days. If you get a 2 LP version, just prioritize the damage over time and freeze rate multiplier. For our boots, we use Snowdrift, which gives us some movement speed and more importantly 2% frost penetration for every 10% freeze rate multiplier we have. This is a massive boost to our damage since it allows us to take enemies far into negative resistance values. You don't have to worry about the legendary potential on these too much, but if you do get some that have LP, these are going to be the stats that you want to go for. For our gloves, we take Frostbite Shackles for the Frostbite chance and duration, as well as ward retention for each percent of uncapped cold resistance we have, meaning if we have 300% cold resistance, we get 300% ward retention. The increased duration of Frostbite is like a damage multiplier since it allows us to stack a lot more Frostbite stacks on a target. You really want to get a high tier roll on the health converted to ward affix here on the LP. For our chest, we use Exsanguinous. This is so we can go low life with the health drain. The buff it gives on the potion use is nice as well, and we really want a high roll on the crit damage reduction affix from the legendary potential. That way we do not have to build into crit avoidance at all. For our belt, we use Strand of Souls for some nice ward generation and ward retention. If you get one that has LP, you can just throw some elemental damage over time on there, and if you get one that has more than 1 LP, you can throw regular damage over time, as well as cold resistance, cooldown recovery speed, necrotic resistance, stuff like that. For our helmet, we use Bone Clamor Barbute, which gives us some nice ward generation based on our necrotic resistance that we will be stacking. For our weapon, we use a Kite and Dagger, since it gives us a ton of poison chance through the base and through our passives. On this, you really want to prioritize getting damage over time and that chance to poison on hit, and then you can get some cold damage and cold pin on the side. The rest of the gear is going to be exalted gear with damage over time and resistances. It's very important that you get 2 rings that have tier 7 throwing mana cost reduction on them. That way your acid flask will go down to 0 mana cost, and it takes a large chunk off the mana cost of explosive trap. Without these reductions, our mana costs are way too high to sustain. Other than that, you're going to be stacking elemental damage over time and some resistances, ideally on a necrotic resistance base. The amulet here is just a sapphire amulet for the freeze rate multiplier and cold res, and again we're going to be stacking some damage over time, freeze rate multi, as well as elemental and cold res. And the relic we're using is the venom file for the chance to poison on hit, as well as damage over time and LE and cold res. For idols, we use a Throne of Ambition. This is going to give us some cold damage and armor while we're fighting rares. It's just a very nice idol for some damage and tankiness. And other than that, we're going to be stacking these chance to poison on hit and necrotic resistance Eteran idols. And then we can go over here and stack up some small Ligonian idols with ward retention and cold resistance. You can also just put one of these Eteran idols here in this 2 slot if you want, and then just run with the 4 idols. So whatever you can get your hands on is nice. This is also a good way to fill out your other resistances. Instead of having a necrotic res rolled on these, you can have your physical, void, res, and so on. For blessings, we're going to take void resistance and physical resistance because we want to save the affixes on our gear for all the other resistances that we're stacking. And then we also take the freeze rate multiplier for more damage and the chance to poison on hit, as well as the armor. So going into the skills and passives, if you go to my planner, I do have the step-by-step skill tree progression, but I'll go ahead and go through them. So starting off with explosive trap, this is going to be the way that we're actually throwing our acid flasks. You can see here with the instrument of the Alchemist node, every time a explosive trap is dropped by the trap sprinkler node, it'll also fling an acid flask for you towards the target location. So that's what all these nodes are. You can go and read over each of these, but essentially what's going to happen is we're going to be throwing our explosive traps, and then when they explode, they're going to be throwing these acid flasks for us. We go down here and we pick up some mana efficiency and mana cost, as well as additional traps thrown each time. That way we can throw 3 traps at once. And then very important, we're going to get smoke traps. This is going to be how we stack up our Dusk Shroud, which is going to give us our extremely high dodge chance and our glancing blows chance. And lastly, we're going to come down here and get this Cold Snap Mines node, which is going to convert explosive trap from fire to cold damage. That's not super important, but it does make it hit a little harder. And then the more important part is that fire resistance shred from all sources is converted to cold resistance shred. So then we put 1 point into Ash Compartment, and this will let us easily cap our cold shred on any of our targets, which again, cold shred when stacked up to 10 times will give us negative 50% cold resistance on the enemies that we fight. Moving over to our acid flask skill tree, we're first going to come up here and get the elixir of speed to give us permanent haste. We're then going to go down and get our poison chance, as well as our chance to blind. And then we're going to come over to the side and get our slow chance with increased travel speed and frailty chance. And lastly, we're going to stack up the increased area. For falconry, our falcon used to be the way that we threw our acid flask primarily. Now it's really just like a nice little companion that's going to give us a little bit more damage, as well as a nice buff. So immediately we're going to come over here and pick up 1 point in Falconer's Mark, and then go down to Marking Strikes, and then get these acid flask nodes. So the Marking Strike makes it to where any of the falcon hits can apply Falconer's Mark. And then we have this Wake of Wings, which whenever we consume Falconer's Mark by hitting an enemy, we get this Falcon's Wake buff, which is going to be a 15% movement speed and attack speed buff. For Smoke Bomb, this is going to be a way that we can apply our Dust Shroud stacks, as well as Silver Shroud, and cleanse our ailments. So first we're going to go down here, and we're going to pick up 1 point in Generosity, and then go down to Enfeeblement, and then we're going to pick up 2 points in Moonlight Bomb. This is going to give us our Silver Shroud stacks, and then we're going to go over and take Cleansing Steam to cleanse elements. After that, we're going to be coming up here to get the 1 point in Shroud of Darkness, and then get our Dusk Shroud frequency with Rapid Concealment. And then from there, we're going to get the increased area and growth speed, and then max our increased area here with Generosity. And then the last 2 points are going to go into Lingering Fume for some increased duration. Shift is our primary movement ability, and it's also the primary way that we restore our mana. So immediately we're going to come down and pick up Velocity for the shorter cooldown and mana cost reduction, and then Momentum, which is going to give us some increased movement speed. And then here on Swift Recovery, this is the node that allows us to sustain our mana. Whenever we're below half health, you can see that every time that we shift, we're going to be gaining 48 mana. And shift only has like a 3-second cooldown whenever you have all the other nodes, and that's without any extra cooldown recovery. So this is going to be what you spam to just constantly refill your mana bar. We're also going to be picking up Shadow Slip for the invulnerability while shifting, and then we're going to come over and pick up these Acid Flask and Dodge nodes. And lastly, if you have the Frostbite Shackles with the Ward conversion roll, you can pick up Emergency Flask, which is going to consume a health potion if you're below 50% health when you shift, and that is going to proc the buff from our Sanguinus. If you do not have the Ward conversion roll, if you do not have the health conversion roll on your Frostbite Shackles, I would not take this point, and instead I would come over here and pick up the Unseen Strike. Because if you pick this up without that second form of health drain, your potions are going to keep you at 2 high HP, and you're going to be over 50% health most of the time, which means you're not going to be getting your mana back from Swift Recovery. For our passives, I have the entire passive tree progression in the planner, so just pull up the planner and follow all these steps, and then you'll be just fine. So, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed the small build guide that I put together for our Frostbite Acid Flask Falconer. If you enjoyed the video, then leave a like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. If you do wind up rolling this character, then let me know how it goes. And again, I appreciate you for watching. My name is Rabbit, and that'll be all.